I am delighted to introduce a wonderful colleague and now a friend, Laura Tyson, who has done work all of her career in trade and competitiveness that led her to be appointed as the chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisors and also director of the White House National Economic Council. After that, she became the dean here of the Haas School of Business, where she continues as a distinguished professor of the graduate school. She's also on the board of trustees for the Blum Center, and she has helped Berkeley over these years to become a pioneer in what is now a booming field of corporate social responsibility and social entrepreneurship. Please welcome Laura Tyson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So maybe I can start to motivate what I'm saying by how I got involved in this. I'm actually not a technologist at all. I actually learned from my son and things like that. But a couple of years ago, and actually it was at a McKinsey lunch at the World Economic Forum, there was a discussion of The Second Machine Age, the book The Second Machine Age, which came out at exactly the same time as a book by Thomas Piketty, Capitalism in the 21st Century. And at this conversation, mostly the people in the room were technologists and business optimists, and they said, God, the technology is really moving fast. It's really going to change the labor market. It's really going to make the need for skills better. We're going to need a whole new social contract, and we're going to need it really fast. So I just raised my hand and I said, social contracts don't come about that fast. They don't come about that fast. They often come from revolution. If this is really moving as fast as you think, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. So I come to it from a kind of public policy perspective, but also from an inequality perspective, because I was reading these two books. One, which is, there's just a new book that Brad has been an editor of. The Piketty book was a major phenomenon around the world in terms of talking about what are the basic drivers of wealth and inequality of income. So inequality of wealth, inequality of income, we've seen it dramatically increase in all the advanced industrial countries. Since the end of World War II, the inequality increase has been most dramatic in the United States, but there it's been. That book says virtually nothing about technology. Virtually nothing about technology. It has a simple, for you economists in the room, simple production function. There's a kind of capital, one kind, no digital capital, differentiation from physical capital, one kind of labor, no labor complemented by technology or substituted by technology. There's only capital labor. And so I got involved in thinking about, God, this book about income inequality and wealth inequality and this prediction that it's going to continue in the future is missing what may have been a major driver of that inequality. And so I really spent a lot of time working on an essay for the second, the book about Piketty's book, looking at the effects of technology over the past, say, 35 years on income inequality and wealth inequality. And it's not a surprise, I think, to find that the evidence suggests that in the advanced industrial countries, technological change, which it's not a new phenomena that technology is substituting for labor. It's not a new phenomena that technology is particularly substituting for middle skilled labor. It's not a new phenomena that some kinds of CEOs and engineers and people with very sophisticated algorithm sense get higher incomes because their skills are complemented by the technology. But so much of the middle is not being complemented by the technology. The technology is substituting for that middle, pushing people into the bottom where things like gardeners or personal security guards or personal servitudes, personal handmaiden. I'm reading the Handmaiden Tale over again, so yes, okay, personal servants. I was at a technology discussion, I think James was there a couple of years ago, when Downton Abbey was really popular. And one of the technologists on the panel was asked what the jobs of the future would be. I kid you not, he said, I envision a world of Downton Abbeys. Okay, very extreme collections of wealth and big amounts of personal servants for everything you want in a day. Think about all the personal services you want from morning to night. Hey, there should be lots of people. A machine can't do it. maybe a person can do it. So I spent a couple of years sort of looking at this, and I would say that the evidence suggests that technological change, the kind that we have been going through for the past 35 years, and the globalization that it has enabled. Because economists and public policy people talk a lot about, oh, is technology the source of the loss of middle-income jobs, or is it globalization? You couldn't have had the kind of globalization we had without technological advances. You cannot run a sophisticated, complex supply chain around the world without intelligent machines in terms of logistics, intelligent machines in terms of communications, intelligent machines in terms of managing the supply chain. So basically, I sort of say it's technological change plus technology-driven or enabled globalization has been a key variable in growing wealth inequality and growing income inequality. This happens in a variety of ways. I just want to sort of mention the various ways that technology can affect these kinds of inequality. We talked a lot already about it favors certain kinds of skill categories and not other kinds of skill categories. That's clear in James's picture. It increases the return to capital over labor. We heard that from Brad. Who owns this technology? It is embedded in the capital. It's embedded in the equipment. It's embedded in the algorithm. Somebody owns that, and they own the returns to the productivity that is generated by that technology. So the ownership of capital and labor matter. I've already mentioned technology turbocharges globalization. It increases the advantages for superstars, sort of this winner-take-all idea. If you can sell your skills to the whole world, if you can be the labor platform for the whole world, if you can be the Google for the whole world, you are a superstar. You get in first, you get such an advantage, such a network advantage and a sticky advantage, that it's going to be really hard to displace you. That's winner take all. It's also the creation of enormous, what economists call rents. You can think of them as supernormal profits. Profits above the level that would exist in a competitive market situation. And I think we can see several large firms in the technology space, we can name them, that have supernormal profits. They are earning rents. Who is taking those rents home in terms of income? The owners of the capital, the owners of the talent complemented by the technology, okay, and not many others. Unless the firm decides that for reasons of fairness or equity or internal organizational structure, they're going to do some sharing with everybody. But they might instead say, hey, I want to outsource the things that I can outsource to take care of my grounds or take care of my kitchen or take care of the other things. I don't need to really worry to share the profits with them. They're doing something else. So there are a variety of ways in which technological change can affect income inequality and wealth inequality, and that's just a list of them. The work that's been gone on the most about this is the very well-known work on polarization, which has been well documented. By polarization simply mean if you look from essentially 1980 to 2015, the latest data, you can see in the US and all of the other advanced industrial countries a change in the distribution of employment. There's a growth in employment for highly skilled, there's a growth in employment for low skills, and there is erosion of the middle. The middle is declining as a share of total employment. You can also see that, not surprisingly, in wages, median wages flat or declining, depending on the time period. Wages at the top, skill distribution rising. Wages at the bottom, low skilled, also basically not rising. So the employment looks like a barbell. The wages look like median stagnating, medium to low falling, top rising. Again, not really surprising because you take the view that the technology is creating demand for certain kinds of skills. Those are the skills that are complemented for by the technology. And it's reducing demand, or let's put it this way, it's reducing demand for the kinds of skills for which the machine can be a substitute. Okay. And by the way, if you're thinking about income inequality, the biggest driver of income inequality is the inequality among wages. Because most people, all the way up to the top 1%, earn most of their income through their labor. We live in systems where basically your income depends on your labor. So if the technology makes your labor less remunerative, if 30% of your activities are taken over by a machine, I don't know, are you going to be paid the same amount you used to be paid? I'm not sure that that's the case, okay? We will take you out. We'll take out the 30%. There's less demand for what you do, and therefore I would predict that's going to be downward pressure on your wages. So I do worry about things like that. Now, since this is also about what we can do, first of all, I love the fact that we're talking about a public university in Berkeley because, look, I'm really engaged right now in the issue of local resistance. Local resistance, okay, on every score. And essentially what we're thinking about here is resisting, coming up with structures, organizations, or I'm going to end on policies that can actually say, wait a minute, we're actually worried about what has happened in the past. We think it's going to get worse in the future if we don't do anything about it. One thing we can do is to try to make choices. I mean, Brad talked about, I think, can we encourage more R&D in the development of technologies that amplify as opposed to substitute for labor? That's a really interesting challenge. I think that's a great thing to do. But we really have to say, what can we do to resist? And here I would just say, this goes back to my social contract point. We live in a society, and all of the societies we compare ourselves to are market societies. They are societies in which people's income depends upon the value of their labor. If there is any danger, and I think there is, that technology continues for a large percentage of the workforce to actually reduce the returns to their labor, increase the amount of returns that are actually going to the owners of machines, not the workers with machines, then we've got to think about what to do as a society if we want a different outcome. So a lot of my numbers, all of the numbers that I was talking about, are really pre-tax and transfer numbers. We can actually do better. Some societies are doing better than the US right now with the same technology, okay? They are, first of all, they are doing much better at education. So actually, if you educate more people to get into the jobs that are complemented by the technology, by the way, what you'll do is you'll bring down the wages of those too, because there'll be an increase in the supply of such things. More and more workers with the high skills needed. You're going to bring down that top level a little, but maybe you just get a reduction in inequality without a decline in the top level of wages. Anyway, education is an important part of the solution, but education cannot possibly be enough, because I'll tell you, I sit in meetings all the time where people say, well, the answer to this is lifelong learning for creative occupations. And I say, okay, lifelong learning for creative occupations. Most people around 40 years old have to worry about the income level they're generating for themselves and their family while they're going to do the lifelong learning education. Okay, even if we design what people should know right, and I think there's a lot of debate about what people should know, how do we protect, ensure their income during the time they're moving to these wonderful, creative new jobs? Okay, I think that we haven't even begun to think about that. So whenever I get in a conversation about change education, I say, okay, you tell me how we're going to finance not just the education, but the people's income while they're in this continuous education all life until all of a sudden they get to retire. Okay, maybe they don't retire. That's one solution. Taxation, I won't mention. We can talk about it. It's an obvious issue. One of the observations that was made in the Second Industrial Revolution book, and I think it's important, is whatever we do to finance the new social contract, it would be a really big mistake to put more taxes on labor. That's a really dumb thing to do. Maybe we should have carbon taxes. Maybe we should have value-added taxes. Value-added taxes actually turn out to be highly redistributive if they're associated with very generous social welfare policies. We know that from Scandinavia. So essentially, we can find ways to finance what we need to do. We need to worry about how we tax, okay? And then the last thing I will just say here is we need to think about all kinds of transfer policies. In the US right now, and I guess I'll end here, So one of the things that people who worry about the future and say longevity, people moving through numerous jobs, not a single employer, gig economy stuff where you don't have a single employer, you better have around you a healthcare system. You better have that. That has nothing to do with your employment base, because you're going to be in and out of employment all the time, and it may not be that high level in income of employment. So one of the key things that it turns out you need is a health system. So I will stop there and say that I want to work with my colleagues. I think that the optimism here has to be about, we've got to identify the problem and we've got to really push for the right policy environment, because who knows whether this technology is going to be good for the individuals in this room. I will accept the notion that we don't know, but I will say that the evidence over the last 35 years is it hasn't been real good for the middle class in the developed economies. Thank you.